Alibrando, a clinical psychologist who also does business consulting and has written the book Follow the Yellow Brick Road: How to Change for the Better When Life Gives You Its Worst. Thanks for coming in, Dr. Sam.
My pleasure.
So tell us a little bit about, I guess, starting out, how you got into clinical psychology and what sparked your interest in it.
It was an accident. Actually, it was an evolution. I started out wanting to be a priest, growing up in a Roman Catholic tradition until I hit puberty, and that was the end of that. So,
Sure.
but it evolved. I was one of those kids who at 8 wanted to know they wanted to be a doctor. It just kind of, each new step opened up for me, and it was very congruent. But I'm very fortunate because I feel like I found my own niche in terms of who I am and a good fit. So that's a very fortunate thing to have.
Excellent.
Work you love. So.
That's something that...
Except for paperwork. I don't like paperwork.
No, who does? That's something not a lot of people can say, though. They're really doing something that they love and enjoy. So that's fantastic. And you work with families, children. What groups do you work with?
You know, I as a clinical psychologist, I work with all the above. I specialize in working more in depth with people, individuals who want to go deeper in their process. I end up seeing a lot of times people who've been with other therapists for a while, and then they hit a wall, and I'll pick it up from there.
Sure.
I kind of developed a special specialization in working with addiction, particularly sex addiction, which is especially with the onset of the internet, has really become an epidemic problem for a lot of people. And a lot of work with couples. Much of what I do in the book, especially the model that I developed in the book, I use as a model with couples quite a bit. And then about 20 years ago, I took over at a clinic. It was a 60-person training clinic, and that's when I found a real interest in leadership. And so since that time, I've worked both as a clinician and also worked in organizations, working with leadership and selection and working with teams in companies, and find that quite fascinating. And
I can imagine. I can imagine it would be.
Yeah.
Do you have something in particular that you most enjoy about your work, besides the obvious answer of helping people?
You know what? I wish I was that. I do like helping people, but I like connecting with people more than I like. That's the part that really makes me. When there's a connection, when there's something that happens that's synergistic between either me and a CEO, or whether it's a 16-year-old kid who's trying to get through a divorcing parents. It's those connections, those real moments that really get me up in the morning.
Yeah, that's great to be able to connect with people and help them at the same time.
Yep.
And tell us a little bit about your book. This is Follow the Yellow Brick Road. Can we see it on camera? Yep, we can see it on camera.
It's a local LA artist who did the cover.
Yeah, it looks great. Tell us a little bit about what the philosophies in the book encompass.
Gladly. When I was just starting out as a clinician, I got introduced to a woman named Karen Horney. And she wrote a book called Our Inner Conflicts, and in it she says there's 3 ways we move. We either move against people, we move toward people, or we move away from people. And that caught my fancy. I just really thought that made a lot of sense. Then when I came to graduate school, toward my doctorate, I came across the work of a guy named Wilfred Bion. He says there's 3 ways we connect to others. We connect either through love, through hate, or through knowing. I said, I know somebody else who did. And then all of a sudden I realized they were completely independent of each other. We're talking about the same thing. And what I developed was an idea of that those are the 3 dimensions of the interpersonal world. Just like there's height, width, and length in the physical world, there's against, toward, and away in the relationship world.
Interesting.
And we have to learn how to move in all 3. And most of us, because of our childhood, our temperaments, perhaps things that happen to us, we get out of whack that way. But all that to be said, I developed this model, and I began to see it in many, many different places. But one day I realized Dorothy's 3 companions. The Scarecrow is moving away. He wanted a brain. Tin Man was heart, moving toward beyond's love. And the lion was moving against. And the first time I mentioned that when I was doing a lecture, after the talk, people just lined up wanting to talk to me, and all they wanted to talk about was The Wizard of Oz. And someone challenged me that day to write something. So I remember I was flying to a business gig in New York City, and I said, well, what else about The Wizard of Oz? Well, we don't change in Kansas, we change in Oz. And I came up with 5 principles that are in the book about how people change. And I geared the book especially for people going through a hard time, because as adults we learn mostly when we're when we get tilted, I call it.
So why do you think it's so hard for people then to accept change in their life?
We as children are a change machine. We're just kind of receiving, downloading all this information, and after a while it starts to solidify. And what we know about the brain is it doesn't like change. After it learns something, it prefers to stick to what it knows, even if it doesn't work for you as an adult. But we still stick to it, and that's what I call Kansas in the book. Kansas is everything we know. And children live in perpetual Oz, but by the time we start settling down, the brain finishes myelinating around 22 or 23 years old, and it so happens human beings kind of start to settle down around then as well.
Sure.
And then we kind of get fixed in our ways. And for the people who are growth-oriented or people going through a hard time, that kind of gets, I call it, that's the tornado, and it throws us into this tilted state, and now it's growth time. Yeah. And we either do things like drink and get drunk or act out so we get away from that, or we stay in the process, and we will usually come out stronger.
It's really interesting because you hear so many people, and I hate to put it in a box, but you hear mostly older people saying, "Well, I'm too old. I'm not going to change. I'm not going to quit smoking. I'm not going to change my personality." But it is possible to change no matter what age you are, isn't it?
It is, and that's the beauty of what we found as the more and more brain research is coming out, which I find absolutely fascinating. Is I work with a man who's 80 years old, and he is as fresh and vibrant and learning every day. And I know people who are 40 who will never grow again in their life.
Yeah.
It's not about age; it's about your willingness. But what we know about the brain is it's what we call elastic. And that basically means even though we're fixed, we also can learn new things. It's not easy, but we can do it.
Yeah. I can change is always possible, definitely. Yep. Guys, if you have any questions for Dr. Sam Alibrando, you're going to get a free copy of his book just for calling in and asking him a question. It's pretty easy, guys. 1-800-336-2225. You can find information about Dr. Sam Alibrando at www.apc3, that's Apple Paul Charlie 3.com. And we'll be back on La La Land right here on CRN Digital Talk. See you in a bit.